This conference will now be recorded.
Hey, Janet, are you smoky down there?
Yeah, we are, and we're 15 miles on the coast from the smoke. So yesterday we were. I think it's better today, but Santa Anas are still there, so we all need to be very careful.
What is it, the 4 seasons of LA? Smog season, fire season, riot season, and beach season? I don't know.
It's still better than Michigan, right? If anyone's listening from Michigan, what is Michigan? Freezing in construction or something? I forgot. They have a funny saying.
Yeah, with California, you can complain about a lot, but you could never complain about the weather. Watching the women's LPGA, and they're in Texas playing golf this week, and it's like 45 degrees, and they're all bundled up in snow jackets playing golf.
Hey, I saw the 49ers there in Arizona, and they're wearing short sleeve shirts, and it's warm. Because they got kicked out of Santa Clara County.
Pretty crazy.
And they actually approached us to use the Coliseum, but we said no.
Yeah, up in Sacramento, I guess if Sacramento shuts down, the Kings are still going to be able to practice, which is so important.
Okay, Chair, we're still waiting on Laura, Joe, Nick, and Alex.
Okay.
Well, I can fill some time. I can fill some time if you'd like. I just, the U.S. plastic waste export data for October was just published today. It's published every month when the labor statistics and job reports come out. And I'm just going through it right now. And actually, I'm surprised, but U.S. plastic waste exports to non-OECD countries actually increased in October. There's a Basel Amendment coming into effect on January 1st, 2021. And we're not decreasing as that limit comes into play. We're actually increasing. And in fact, California increased a lot from 8.2 million kilograms to 9 million kilograms of plastic waste exports to non-OECD countries in 1 month. And I'm really actually just stunned that the numbers keep going up.
Does California get tagged with everything that goes out of the port of Long Beach, LA? I mean, is Arizona in there, Nevada, New Mexico, Utah? Anything
Mars.
West?
Mars? No. This is actually data originating in California. There's multiple ways. If anyone's listening and interested in this data, it's on the U.S. Import-Export Data website. It's free. You can register. You can go in and pull down data. And there's various views to look into it. And no, there's actually the origination by state. There's also dispatch by port. So when we look at the Port of LA and the Port of Long Beach, that's actually a bigger number, and that could include exports from Arizona. But actually exports from Arizona are very low. When you go in and look at the state from Arizona, And the further you get into the middle of the country, actually, the lower the exports are. Some states in the middle of the country have never exported plastic waste because obviously it's not cost effective to put it on a truck and get it to the port of Long Beach or the port of Laredo to truck into Mexico. So no, that is in fact plastic waste that originated in California.
Wow, I wonder what all that plastic is.
Okay, Chair, I think we're only missing Joe at this point. Commissioner Kalpakoff, everyone else is here.
Okay, are Laura and Alex, are they?
Yeah, Commissioners Osquera, Ferrante, and Bouchard and Lapis are here.
Why am I not seeing them? Oh, there we go.
I'm just getting coffee, so sorry. I'm eating lunch.
Right, so with that, I'll get the meeting started. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Recycling Committee meeting of the Statewide Commission on Recycling Markets and Curbside Recycling. Today is the December 4th meeting. I'd like to start off by just going through roll call to establish quorum. So Commissioner Bouchard.
Here.
Commissioner Dell.
Present.
Commissioner Ferrante.
Here.
Commissioner Lapis.
Here.
Commissioner Oseguera.
Here, just walking over to get coffee.
Okay. Commissioner Valle.
Here.
And Commissioner Kalpakoff is not present at the moment. We'll read him in if he were to sign on. I haven't heard from him. So hopefully he'll be able to join us. So we do have quorum. I'd like to go through any public comments that are regarding items that are not on the agenda. Kate, do we have any?
Yes, we have one new public comment, and then there's a public comment that I missed last week, but it is in the meeting notes that have been published. So I'd like to read that one aloud too. Sorry, as I lost where they are. First public comment, which was submitted, I'll do Dan Dominowski's comment from November 13th first. His public comment was, during the November 13th CalRecycle Statewide Commission webcast, included a presentation by Sealed Air / Green Blue. Reference was made to the R-Flex bales being made in Pennsylvania with a pilot study which created flex / film plastic bales without markets and contamination levels of over 20%. However, instead of acknowledging the misinformation being spread far and wide, the presenter referred to the bales as having value. They do not. As anyone who participated in their webcast knows, neither RRS nor their participants were able to accurately explain their misleading or downright factually incorrect statements. Finally, the suggestion that MRFs need to modernize and get funding so they can sort various non-recyclable materials into the petrochemical packaging and brands want to keep greenwashing is absurd. What MRFs need is to receive clean, dry, sortable materials with viable markets. So again, that's published and was submitted on November 13th. The other public comment we have is Jessica Craven. Her message is, Commission, I am writing as a longtime Los Angeles resident and environmental activist to say that I support the Commission's recommendations. I support local additions for recycled items to meet state criteria and 75% as a pathway to be recycled. We should also require extended producer responsibility for CRV bottles. Finally, please adopt stricter standards for what is compostable. Thanks. That has been published. No other comments at this time.
Okay, and then I did receive an email, and I believe we have this posted up on the Google Docs, but it was an email just as a follow-up from the Aluminum Can Association. Let me read a good portion of it, but it's the Aluminum Can Association position on California Recycling Committee proposal regarding plastic shrink sleeves and plastic use on cans. They put in their letter, plastic shrink sleeves are increasingly being used by craft brews and other small beverage producers for the labeling of aluminum cans and small batch runs where flexibility and timeliness are important. Unfortunately, they can create significant issues in the aluminum can recycling process including missorting in MRFs, flammable residue buildup in shredding equipment, and air emission issues in the melting of cans to make new ones. For these reasons, the metal can supply chain is working on alternatives to shrink sleeves, such as small batch digital printing and film applied UV cured inks. As these alternatives are improved and the cost reduced, they will present more recycling friendly alternatives for small beverage producers that package their products in aluminum cans. However, the Aluminum Can Association recognizes the utility of plastic shrink sleeves for aluminum can labeling until alternatives replace them. In the interim, before this occurs, rather than an outright ban on shrink sleeve labels, the association supports requiring language on the shrink sleeve label directing that it be removed prior to recycling. So I'll just end right there. And again, this document is posted on the Google Docs, but I thought it was good to read this in where we do have a national association. They're watching and listening to what we're doing, and they're beginning to be proactive to cure some of the problems that we're facing with products that are being made with items that are harmful to the recycling of the material. So, Kate, any other comments for it?
No other comments. I'll actually, let me just refresh to make sure. No other comments at this time.
Okay. And then I'll move on to item number 3, review and potential approval of meeting notes. Has everybody had a chance to review the notes? Any additions, comments, or motion to approve?
Move approval.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Valle, second by Commissioner Kalpakoff, who's in attendance. Thank you for attending.
It was Bouchard seconded.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Bouchard. All right, all those in favor, thumbs up. Thank you. Okay, we do have what's turning out to be a busier meeting today. We're going to have some discussion on policy recommendations for e-commerce and a pathway to the producer responsibility. Then we'll get into some bottle bill issues that we've sent out in advance. And then I'll start off by a huge thank you to Cal Recycle. They provided a lot of information on the data request that was made, I think, back in October. I know it took them a lot of work, so the information will be very helpful. So at the end of the meeting, we'll spend some time on it. But again, it was a lot of information that was provided yesterday. So with today, let's be as brief as we can and get through these. So for item 4, Jan or Nick, either one of you want to go first on either e-commerce or the policy for the pathway to achieve the recyclable in California label?
So if I could suggest, Nick, if you would like to do the pathway policy, and then actually have 2 policy proposals, Commissioner Dunleavy. And I think the screen of what's being shown here about Amazon isn't correct, just so that we acknowledge that this isn't specifically about Amazon. This was from that was from the last meeting. So just so no one in the public is confused that Amazon spoke in the November 13th meeting. So this section, we're reviewing the 3 policy proposals that we have to review. And I think this is the last recycling committee meeting of the year because ours got canceled on the 18th to be replaced with the commission. That's so sad. So this is our last chance to go through these 3 policy recommendations and decide if a group we want to move them to the full commission for discussion on the 16th and 18th to be included in the preliminary report. And so yesterday I sent the 3 drafts to Kate. I tried to upload them on the Google, but I don't have access to the recycling committee folder. And Jeff, I don't know, you couldn't get it in. So we have 3 text drafts, which
Kate,
should end up in the...
Can you bring up the pathway to
Yes.
recyclable?
Nick, would you like to go on that one?
Jan, I thought you did that one.
Oh, if you want. Okay, do you want to do? But,
Is this
but you have the other stuff, so you know what this one is.
Could you scroll down a little bit? I'm just confusing them in my mind a little bit. A little bit further. Oh, yeah. Okay. Thank you. Sorry. So, Jan, I don't know if you want to start. I mean, you wrote most of this. I think the general thinking is that if a manufacturer wants to be added to the list of recyclable, they've got to show how they're complying with each of the 7 criteria, and they've got to present data to show how they're either currently complying or how they have contracts, purchase orders, or legal mandates or something else that shows that they will be in compliance shortly. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add, Jan.
Scroll down. So this is the key point right here. So we took the criteria that was in the number, Nick, the Sustainable Packaging Act of 2018. We took that criteria. Yeah. Okay, that one. And that was what was used to do the whole survey of what is recyclable in California today. And that is at the commission level for discussion. But then it became obvious that we needed to actually take those same criteria and make a pathway for something to become recyclable, because our goal is to, of course, minimize waste and improve recyclability. So if things are not recyclable today, we'd like to be able to get them on the recyclable list in the future when end market demand is created. So we took the criteria, we put it in a table, and the direct sort, and really put some crunchy metrics around the 7 criteria that are in the Packaging Act. And the data source, we gave recommendations for where the data could come from, and then thresholds, which were used in the bigger survey. And all of this feeds into the result that the director of Cal Recycle has the authority to consider all of these criteria and make the recommendation that something will be considered recyclable. So if we want to go through the thresholds, we can, or suggestions for where the data comes from.
Dan, I actually think we changed it from the director to the commission, didn't we?
I didn't know the commission would last forever, so I assumed that the Cal Recycle director would have to be the commission.
The commission doesn't sunset, so it's an ongoing responsibility of the commission.
We could check that, and we could so we're reading this one now to take up to the full commission for a discussion. Let's just scroll through whether it's the commission or the.
Can I suggest, since everybody's looking at this for the first time, we'll go through this, but take a closer look between now and the full commission meeting, and we get into a little more detail, or iron out changes or whatever there as well. It's hard to follow on the screen and simultaneously comment, I think.
Okay, so either the director of Cal Recycle or the commission, if it still exists, or both, would look at those criteria and then make the decision.
But I mean, it boils down to manufacturers have to submit how they're in compliance or about to be in compliance. The one thing that's missing from this that I still think we need to address is the idea of some kind of probationary period. We had talked about that, and it's not reflected in this document yet. Jan, maybe you did change it back to CalRecycle. I had it as the commission for sure.
And I'd probably change it back to CalRecycle because I assume the commission would not live forever.
I mean, from the other committee members, any thoughts whether it would be better to go with Director of CalRecycle or have that decision with commission? Any thoughts on that?
Jeff, I was thinking the same as Commissioner Lapis, that we've been seated, but there's really no termination for the commission that I've seen, unless I'm wrong. So I think either way works.
And Commissioner Lapis, as far as a probationary period, and for everybody, I'm working on and I'll have a draft of the policy for what is recyclable ready for the December 16th meeting. And that'll identify what we think is meets the criteria now. But there are items that will be local ads because people do have contracts and they do have equipment to sort PP5 or they have equipment to sort thermoforms. And I think it's going to be up to those brands and the manufacturers of those items to demonstrate that their products are being recycled, they're being collected, they're being separated, and they're being recycled and turned into a new item, and continuing to demonstrate that the value of that material is paying for the processing and transportation to market. And they're widely accepted, and it makes sense from the far north of California all the way to the California, Mexico, Arizona border. So it makes sense for all the programs to do those materials. And I think with the criteria you've laid out, I don't know if we need a probationary period, but I think a long-term commitment that the value of the material will be there for a 5 to 10 year period, whether it's through purchasing contracts with the facilities, but making sure that there's enough value, whether it's collected and processed up in Crescent City or Blythe, that it makes sense for them just as it does in Southern California or the Bay Area. So there's enough market value to pay for it to get it from those distant facilities. And I think they'd be able to demonstrate that to CalRecycle staff and the director to be able to make that decision to put them onto the recyclable list, so they could then start labeling and marketing and then continually demonstrating that their material is being separated and turned into new items. So any other thoughts on this? Is this something that Commissioner Bouchard?
Yeah, I'm not sure if we're talking about the same thing, but I also recall what Commissioner Lapis is talking about, but I don't remember it being labeled as a probationary period. I thought it was more of a grace period to allow for them to make it recyclable. So I'm not sure if we're talking about the same issue or not.
Any other comments from other commissioners on this? Is this some?
I have a related question. So when we had talked about the list at the full commission, I think we had decided that we were going to try to go back and update some of the data values. I know John Davis had mentioned that I think he said his information was inaccurate for polypropylene, which would push them into the recyclable category. And I think we were going to go back and make sure the raw information was updated with that.
just a clarification on that. He had a piece of data that changed the acceptance of 1 or maybe 2 MRFs, but that didn't push polypropylene into recyclable because the other criteria weren't met. So he was just focused on the 1 criteria of acceptance. So Commissioner Dunleavy, maybe this is something that we should take up at the full commission though and put these 2 things together. I think they kind of need to live together. What is the recyclable list? What is the process to get on to be what is recyclable statewide in California? There can be local ads when there's enough local ads and you can qualify to be statewide. I feel like these things should now be put together and discussed in totality at the commission level in one nice package when you've got this other policy put together.
So I totally agree that we should do that. I just want to make sure that the changes he identified are reflected so that our data is accurate. Because I haven't looked at the numbers, but he said that it actually would change the overall recyclability of polypropylene. I haven't looked at it, so I actually don't know, but
Okay.
Let's make sure that his factors are, or his data points are included.
Okay, I'll reach out to Commissioner Davis just to confirm his information. And with that, do we have a motion to move this up to the commission level so we could address it as an entire body on the 16th?
I motion to do that. I motion to do that. And really, I do think if you could take some time and put these together, these 2, what is recyclable and how do you get onto the list so that we can discuss them together logically at the commission level. And with this idea of then there'll be local ads, then there'll be a logical framework. We'll all be in one place to discuss the whole thing with the full picture.
I'll second the motion with that same thought.
All right, all in favor of moving this along with what is recyclable list together up to the commission on the 16th? All those in favor? Looks like consensus. Commissioner Oseguera, was that a thumbs up or abstain? There we go. Excellent. All righty. Very good. So we got another item up to the commission on the 16th. Next item up, Commissioner Dell, do you have e-commerce packaging?
Right. Okay. So if we could pull that one up. This is something we've talked about several times before. We had testimony from e-commerce packaging companies last week, last meeting, November 13th. And really, this is quite simple. This policy requirement requires e-commerce packaging companies to use outside, I'm going to use an example, outside packaging and inside air cushioning packaging that is curbside recyclable. Because what's currently being used now is not curbside recyclable and it's causing contamination in curbside bins. We gave the 2 companies who testified in the November 13th meeting, we asked them a month ago to show us this is actually getting collected and recycled in California, and they couldn't provide facts that prove this. And at the same time, they acknowledged that plastic films are causing contamination in curbside bins. The example I'm showing, and I see this in my neighbor's bins all the time, is a cardboard box, nice recyclable box, but down in the bottom there's a deflated plastic package that came with it, deflated, and it's all just tossed into curbside bins. And this is really a problem because it causes contamination and hazards to workers to cut it all out. It's ruining paper bales, it's driving up costs, and it's creating waste. And e-commerce packaging in India has now gone to fully fiber. And so the policy recommendation is to require that e-commerce outside and inside packaging be curbside recyclable, which at this point means it's fiber. Of course, any kind of medical or special packaging would be accepted.
Okay, any comments from commissioners? Commissioner Bouchard, I think that was the last item. Any commissioners wish to comment on this policy? Okay, seeing none. Kate, you have one public comment?
Yes, we have one public comment from Elevate organization where this was in regards to the last document. Where can I see the document that the committee is currently reviewing? The 7 criteria listed. I do not see it in the Dropbox or any of the materials that has been published. And that's it.
Okay, and the reference to the matrix, that should be posted up on the Google Docs. So we do have that available. Commissioner Lapis.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that these 3 documents are not in the Google Drive. Right? Did I understand that correctly? Can we make sure that they're added?
I think they were posted up this morning.
They were? Oh, okay. I didn't realize that. And then I have a question. This is something we had raised earlier, but never really reached any kind of satisfactory conclusion on. We have grade 54 paper bales listed on here. And I know that a lot of companies over the years have claimed that their products are recyclable because they could go into a grade 54 bale, even though there aren't that many outlets for that material. I'm thinking cartons specifically. Do we want to just give a pass for a grade 54?
Grade 54 sorted news or a mixed paper, I think the product needs to be recyclable and not an acceptable outthrow as a carton might be. I was on a national panel yesterday with the Zero Waste organization, and the MRF operator from Minneapolis was talking about the Amazon Dream packages with the puffy glue. And her comment was the mills are starting to push back, that the craft paper is good, but the puffy glue is balling up and it's acting like styrofoam, or it clots up and gets down into the pulp and creates smears on the rolls. So it's good for the packaging, but as more of that gets out there, the mills are starting to push back that it's not just an outthrow, it's becoming a bad contaminant. So I think the material needs to be acceptable in a grade 54 as something that gets recycled, but not an outthrow.
Would you be able to add that to that sentence?
Okay. Because if they were to convert from bubble wrap to a craft paper, like a lot of e-commerce is starting to move to, that would be good. But if they used a wax or poly-coated craft paper, as an example, that wouldn't be good. Because the craft paper is acceptable, but if it's coated or wax lined, it becomes a contaminant. So yeah, let me take a crack at adding a line to that, if that'll help move this forward.
Yeah, I welcome any more specifications around the paper fiber. That's not my specialty. To make that more specific of what that's talking about and what that means, yes or no. I thought the septic cartons were 52, grade 52. No,
they are a grade 52 on their own, but they're an acceptable outthrow and a grade 54, meaning a small percentage can go in there, but they are going to get thrown away.
And I'm sorry, I totally did conflate 52 and 54 for a second there. 52 is what I was thinking of, not 54. Yeah. So that I apologize, total brain fart.
Chair Donlevy and Commissioner Lapis, can you clarify again maybe what you're going to be specifying or changing on this? We just want to capture it appropriately in our notes. What would you like us to put down for? There will be slight changes made to this proposal regarding.
So for the
material
paper,
must not be. Actually, Jeff, you phrased it better than I was about to.
Yeah. So for paper and cardboard packaging material that meet grade 11 or 54 quality bale specifications are acceptable as long as the material is not identified as an acceptable outthrow.
Perfect, thank you.
So within bale specs, you have outthrows and you have prohibitives. A prohibitive might be a brick or a glass bottle in a paper bale. But in a mixed paper bale, a phone book would be an outthrow. It's in the paper family, but it does get thrown out if you have a phone book in a bale of mixed paper. So it's an acceptable outthrow. It won't do damage to the equipment like a brick or a glass bottle, but they don't want more than a certain percentage of that in there. So material should not be an acceptable outthrow, such as coated paper.
Okay.
So craft paper would be acceptable. A coated craft paper would not.
I will resend the committee this version with the note I made, just on what we'll put in the notes. Perfect.
Okay, can you clarify? So are these documents posted on the Google Drive? Because I can't find them.
I do not see these three. There are some similar names, but I haven't seen anything new to the Google Drive from when I checked this morning.
Okay.
I do not believe these are on there.
Would you be able to make sure that the three are on there so that people can follow along?
I cannot make changes to Google Drive. I don't have authority, but I know there are a couple folks who are really good at posting Google Drive on the commission. I would probably check them or grant maybe more authority if allowed to more commissioners.
I've been working with Commissioner Ward to help get some things posted, so I'll make sure that they do get posted up. Commissioner Kalpikoff.
Thank you, Commissioner Donlevy. So the question that I have is, this is specifically for e-commerce, correct?
Right.
Okay. And this would be targeting companies that ship into California, right?
Right.
From any country and any other state? All right.
Definitely from within the United States. That could take some more specification by what do we mean by e-commerce packaging. It's not the original equipment manufacturer, right? It's not, if you're ordering a laptop from Asia and it's coming in that package. It's the companies that consolidate and repackage. That consolidate. So that's what e-commerce, I believe the definition is. Well, there's a bigger definition, but we could put more definition of this. It's that the companies that are the middlemen in middle people in repackaging and then selling to a consumer. So it's
within the United States.
Go ahead.
The way that this has been handled in other bills, similar bills, is basically the first seller in the state. So whoever's the first entity to sell or offer for sale in California, so that gets after everything that's imported.
So after it gets imported, it gets repackaged and then sold.
Even if it doesn't get repackaged in the state, the first person to sell or offer for sale, we're not. It doesn't say that here, but in similar bills, that's how we've gone after everything that's sold in the state.
Okay, and this would require legislation, right? And there's no cost for some sort of agency that's going to monitor this?
Very good point.
I
couldn't hear it.
If I bought a pair of boots from Texas and they came in with plastic or a paper lined lining around them, they would have to change their packaging to sell their product in California. Right?
No.
Right.
No.
Right. Why no?
I think that's the next bridge. I think the first bridge is the companies that are taking somebody else's product, repackaging it in a box with a cushion or the original pouch. You know, they're selling you a book and they're putting a pouch around it. So this could be a road of improvement, but the initial e-commerce packaging is around these consolidators who get the boots from someone else, put it in their own box. Then that box and the packaging around that boot box outside of the box would all have to be curbside. To go to all the original manufacturers of boots and everything is then the next step. It's much harder. There's a small set of e-commerce companies that are doing this purchasing and consolidation. We can name them: Amazon, Walmart, Target, that are in this business, and maybe a few more. But then you go out to all the places that make stuff and put it within packaging and put it in styrofoam or other things. That's just, a wide number. And so this bill is just to start at this initial repackaging step to stop this, the lowest hanging fruit of problematic packaging.
So I would say we're not actually being that explicit, and the legislature would have to decide the scope.
Okay.
So you think, Nick, it's good that we let the legislators come up with details of this, or is this? Obviously you don't want to hurt small businesses anywhere in shipping, and I agree with you, Jan, and that we don't want this stuff in the curbside either. So I'm just trying to wrap my hand around how it actually is going to work. It seems impossible to me, unless you target specific companies that are large retailers that make up 60% of the packages coming in, and that's probably what you're targeting. Am I right?
Right.
My answer to that might be a little bit different, Jan's. My answer is, why negotiate with ourselves when we know this is going to go through a political process? It's going to involve negotiation. And I think as a general statement, we want e-commerce package to be recyclable, period. Whether if a bill ends up with a smaller scope because of negotiation, then that's part of the process. But I don't think that's for us to negotiate with ourselves.
Okay, Commissioner Ferrante has her hand up.
Yeah, thanks. I thought I understood this, and now based on the last few comments, I'm a little confused. Jan, it doesn't sound like you're talking. I don't know. Maybe repackaging is the wrong word. It sounds like you're talking about packaging for shipping, not repackaging like packaging the product, but you're talking about protective material inside of a shipping box, right?
Right.
Box.
Yeah.
So,
right. Or a pouch, because there's these millions of these plastic pouches.
Yeah.
Right.
So
these are the outer packaging and the outer cushioning, which my engineer Statewide brain thinks this could be step one to legislate. But I totally appreciate Commissioner Lappis's thinking that the end game would be to have everything, including the internal, styrofoam or plastic packaging, any internal packaging, all be curbside recyclable. So, and you could start, as Commissioner Kalbakoff just said, with a certain amount of size of company and larger and target it. So maybe we want to have it more broad than what I was just thinking of to start with.
Yeah, I mean, that would be the way to go. I would think if you want to ramp it down, is start with the larger companies and come down, because the clarification that you and Joe are going through. I mean, that boot seller in Texas would have to comply with the packaging of that boot for shipping to California. So it sounds like you're going to want to go big and then ramp down. No?
Yeah, agreed. I think we might have actually put in the size of a company in here. But this is where I haven't drafted a lot of policies. I would actually really defer to Commissioner Lapis, who's done a lot of these, about what is the strategic way to frame the details or leave it a bit open for the legislature to take up.
Yeah, I mean, we are an advisory body. We don't have any authority to pass regulations. And, you know, we should, again, go back to what I said, I don't think we should be negotiating with ourselves. If at some point we decide that the boot seller in Texas is below a certain threshold, that's what the legislature decides and they want to exempt them, then that's fine. But
yeah.
I agree.
Really quick,
let me jump in here, Commissioner Koplikoff. I mean, you really got me thinking about interstate commerce, international commerce, and then Commissioner Ferrante talking about size, whether it's the size of the company or the size of the package. I think the intent is good because it's the smaller stuff in boxes that might be, 2 by 2, the stuff that we're getting delivered to our doorsteps. But e-commerce could be considered mattresses. It could be the couch that you get from Overstock, and that's going to come in a box with plastic, with strapping, with bracing and blocking in there. So I think we are going to have to define this a little bit more, not to negotiate with ourselves, but not to put a lot of companies in a bind. And I'll just say like an Overstock.com or Lovesac or the mattresses. That's all packaging that has to be there to really protect the product. But I just ordered holiday gifts for some clients, and I got 3 boxes with bubble wrap inside a bigger box. And the 3 boxes could have just been mailed individually instead of inside the bigger box with all the bubble wrap around it. And I think that's the intent of it, correct?
So
if we wanted to clarify that, I just looked at how it was written in SB 54. SB 54 had 3 different categories of packaging, and the first one was tertiary packaging. So we could limit it to that if that was the will of the group. But we define it as transport packaging or tertiary packaging intended to protect the product during transport, as opposed to the product packaging itself.
Yeah, that was the intent of what we were originally going for. I think I called it outer packaging with cushion packaging. So that's exactly the tertiary packaging around third-party packaging of not furniture. So what are the right words to get this down to this space? We're really talking about a high volume, the high volume of pouches and boxes filled with packaging, right? The air things that have something else inside, where it's very simple to use fiber in both cases. Just to narrow it down to that as initial bridge to make an improvement, which will definitely start keeping some of this plastic film out of our recycle bins. Bigger picture to take on what's around a sofa, longer term, or get inside what's inside the boot company longer term. But there's this initial thing, this low-hanging fruit that has practical alternatives. It's being done in India that could be implemented now, soon. We just have to get the words right around it.
So I put what I read out loud into the chat. I read it out loud, but just for the record, I also copy pasted it into the chat.
Sorry, Nick, I didn't catch that. Thank you.
Okay, Kate, we got one public comment.
We have two. So these were submitted at 1:31 and 1:39. The materials are not in the Dropbox. Please confirm that you will add them to the Dropbox. They're also not included with the agenda on CalRecycle's page. And another comment, what is the name of the documents that you're discussing on the Google Drive? How do we read these documents while you discuss? There are 3. Are you on the first of 3? And those have been published, those comments.
Okay, we'll get the documents posted. Okay, are we at a point where if we add a little more language to this, we can move it up to the commission level for more discussion and possible approval to get into the report? Are we comfortable enough with the discussion we've had to add some language to it and move it up?
So my question to everyone is, are you comfortable with this tertiary package idea of pouches and boxes and the internal packaging? Because that's really what this is focused on, taking that approach. Or it could be going much more broad, open-ended, as Nick's suggesting, which has value, but the low-hanging fruit of these outer packaging, third-party, easy to change, doesn't hurt little companies, is what the initial focus is.
Any other thoughts or comments or a motion to Commissioner Kalpikoff?
2 quick comments. So while I have concerns with Commissioner Lappis's approach of give them one color and have them paint whatever they want, is sometimes comes out the wrong way that we had originally designed it, or our thought process was in this. And I feel that getting it more specific as a recommendation for our policy recommendation is specific and more laser beamed on what the problem is and how to solve it is a better way to go on this subcommittee. But you know, if it's consensus, it's consensus that it goes up. I still have my other comment would be there's a concern about the cost of implementing this as well and who's going to monitor it, and how that. And because it's in this current policy, it says there's nothing, right? So
yeah,
there's no cost to this, which I'm having a hard time understanding that there's going to be no cost to this, and that's may come up down the road. So you know, if there is a mechanism to have another agency look at this, or maybe it's the post office, I don't know. But there is.
I think the cost.
This is a significant cost of tracking every package. Now that probably 80% of retail is done online, coming into California, that's I don't know how it gets done free. So,
you're right. Cost of enforcement. There'll have to be somebody within the state that would be responsible for enforcement. So there is a cost. What that would be, we don't know at this point. So, Commissioner Dell.
Yeah, the cost of changing materials would be borne by the business and their profit lines. I actually just read that that Amazon actually charges the companies they sell for $1.99 per box on a certain size if they're not packaging it right. So they're rolling down the cost. So in terms of if there's a material cost change, that would be borne by the companies. And then the monitoring cost, if they're complying or not, it's going to come down to a few big companies that we're going to be focusing on. And that would be the truth for anything else they do. Do they have labor laws? Do they have health and safety laws? Do they have, deceptive labels on nutrition or not? I mean, the cost of monitoring becomes just like anything else in California around monitoring and verification and enforcement of laws.
I will take a stab at adding maybe some narrative around the enforcement costs being variable depending on, which model is chosen for enforcement. Because there are a lot of ways you could do it. I agree it probably won't be free. Although you could hypothetically do it without any state costs if you just left it to competitor enforcement.
And then let's also remember the cost savings when all of these plastic packages don't end up in MRFs and don't cause downtime, right? Or don't end up in a landfill and don't cost for landfill. Yeah. So there's a lot of cost to these non-recyclable packages that are contaminating 76 California MRFs.
It would definitely improve the overall quality and prevent contamination, which would help the collectors and the processors. But as Mr. Commissioner Kalpagoff pointed out, there's going to be a cost to the state for inspection and enforcement. I think we might be able to add that in, getting some ballpark numbers. I saw on one of the documents that Cal Recycle provided, it might be related to adding wine and spirits to the program. That would also increase enforcement costs. And I thought they had some head count in there. I think we can get, estimated number that we could add to this and then move it up to the commission level, because there will be costs borne by the state for inspection and ultimately enforcement. They could get that money back through fines or things like that. But I think to move this forward, we will need to put some estimated costs for monitoring and enforcement.
I would say I would not.
We're not doing that on any other. We're not doing that on any other policy. You could put there could be an enforcement cost to California, just as there are on other laws. But there is not one other policy recommendation in this entire commission where we are putting monetary values around enforcement.
Yeah, let me be clear.
I would say if I were introducing this as a bill, I don't think I would say Cal Recycle has to do enforcement. I would probably make it a violation that district attorneys can enforce. And in the case of, that's what we do with biodegradable, for example. You can't use the term biodegradable. And if you're a retailer, you can't sell something that's labeled biodegradable if it's made of plastic. And the district attorneys have worked together to go after the retailers. Given the scope of these companies, I imagine the district attorneys or the attorney general's office would gladly take this on, and it would probably be, covered by their own costs through any settlements. So I would avoid personally having this be a Cal Recycle program because it would be an unfunded enforcement program.
And that was Nick, you nailed it. That's my point. And that there has to be some, we can't move it up and say that it's a zero cost. That was my point. And I don't think we're qualified to actually put a dollar amount on it either. I'm certainly not.
That's totally fair.
Yeah.
That's
so.
I'll take a stab at that. Should we, for purposes of time, move it with those couple changes, or what do you guys want to do? The couple changes is clarifying that we're talking about transfer packaging, and then clarifying that enforcement would have a cost, but it depends on which model is chosen.
I also like the fact that we have it start with large e-commerce companies rather than small ones. If we're gonna go after and see how it works before we burn small businesses that are making boots in Texas.
Boots in Texas, or the local clothes store. Yeah, some threshold of revenue.
That would be awesome.
I just think it's also important,
that's
in terms
actually
of
in there.
Commissioner Oseguera.
Yeah, in terms of, I do think there is a need for additional thought in terms of how is this going to be, managed, in terms of packaging being delivered to homes. How is that process going to be audited? I would imagine that, I think someone mentioned the Postal Service, but they only manage, I think, a decreasing number of packages nowadays compared to other companies. So I still believe there's quite a bit of discussion of how is that going to be done. That is a big, I think, resource type of question that has to be asked, has to be answered or looked at.
I guess given in my mind that we don't have resources at CalRecycle to do something like that, I think we have to leave it to the enforcement agencies, the district attorneys and attorney general's offices.
And that's the logical place. That's where all of these things, I mean, CRV is different. Hold CRV, that's a CalRecycle deposit system aside. Everything else around product specification, is a product safe? Can you put a pull tab on a can anymore? All of that is handled through the legal enforcement of laws in California that Nick just described. They don't come under CalRecycle to do product review and product legislation. Are you following product laws and enforcement? So it would go into all of the other long list of product laws that we have in California and be part of the enforcement that is or isn't done around those product laws.
So Commissioner Lapis, if you could add a little clarification language, and I can help on the material grades, but as far as enforcement, if we did that, could we get a motion to move this forward, present it to the entire commission on the 16th for review and possible approval? Or if there's still additional questions, it might have to wait until getting into the report in June or July.
Or if folks feel like it's not baked, we can leave it with this group and it gets moved to July. It's not the end of the world. I mean, I'd rather have a good product than hurrying up.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. It's such a huge issue.
Yes, I agree.
Okay, Commissioner Dell, you good with that?
Yeah, sure. No problem.
Okay. All right, so we'll table this one. Is there a third one that we wanted to review?
Yes. This one's very simple. And it's actually one that originated, this is a policy recommendation that the recycle symbol be taken off of all plastic flexible packages, films, wraps in California. This policy recommendation was actually originally introduced in the Label Committee back in July, August, September. The Label Committee at that time decided it would be better that labeling issues around specific contamination things on organics or recycling go to those two respective committees. And so we've been waiting as all the other agenda around what is recyclable and what is compostable works its way through the committees to bring up some specific actionable policy recommendations. And so now I'm bringing this, reintroducing this one from the Label Committee to this committee, then to take up to the commission. And it's really quite specific in that it simply says the recycle symbol cannot be used on plastic wraps and films because they're not curbside recyclable. They're causing great contamination in California. 52% of Californians think plastic bags are recyclable. Recycling Partnership did a study. They showed that. They also, in the study they did, also found out that consumers thought they were recycled because of the chasing error symbols. And so during the last committee meeting, when we talked to the plastic film people about these bags, they acknowledged that they are causing contamination. And I politely asked, well, can you please take the recycle symbol off? Because people are really confused. And they declined to take it off. So that shows you that we actually need to pass a policy recommendation saying, just don't use a recycle symbol. You can use the word store drop off if you want. I don't really think there are store drop offs anymore. You can use take back to store or something, but this recycle symbol really needs to be only used for what goes in the recycle bin, because consumers are they just equate the recycle symbol with what I can put in the bin. So this is simply a policy recommendation to not allow the word recycle or the recycle symbol on plastic wraps and films.
I think this one is pretty simple. It's pretty specific. And last night I got a bubble wrap pouch and the recycling symbols were about an inch tall on the packaging. On both sides, they had 3 recycle symbols, and inside the arrows was small font in-store drop-off for Amazon. And I'm like, no phone number to find out where the in-store drop-off is, but I like it. Any commissioners have any comments or thoughts on this? I think this one's...
I'm in with Commissioner Dell all the way. Good idea. Simple, straightforward.
Yeah, ditto. I think this is great, and I wouldn't be surprised if this gets introduced as a bill.
Yeah, it's
I agree.
Very simple, straightforward. Take the recycling symbol off of plastic bags, films, wraps, and pouches. So, okay, Commissioner Kalpikoff.
Yeah, just one quick question or clarification from Jan. The Macy's bag on your policy has please reuse. Is that out too?
Nope, didn't take that out. Simply
Okay.
the word recycle and recyclable.
And aluminum.
Please
Got it.
recycle this bag. No, reuse. Please reuse that bag.
That's the
right?
only thing that caught my eye on your labeling on your policy. That was it.
Yeah, no, I didn't say, in there. I didn't physically call out reuse because the whole reuse group in this commission may decide there's a specific definition of reuse, but it's just no recycle, no recyclable symbol. People see it, they put it in the curbside bin. We'll never, that word has to be saved for the bin.
I'll make a motion.
All right. Kate, any comments on this? Public comments?
No comments at this time.
Seeing none, I think we have a motion from Commissioner Kalpikoff.
Yeah, no comments. You're good.
Second. Second.
Second by Commissioner Oseguera. All right, thumbs up for everybody. Commissioner Dell, well done. The shorter, the simpler, the better.
Mr. Chair, I have to leave the meeting at this time. I'm sorry. So thank you.
Commissioner Valle, thank you for your time. Good luck with the other project outside of work or outside of the commission. Okay, Kate, thank you for bringing up the slides. We'll move on to item 5. I'll try and get through these as quick as possible. Regarding processing payments and density and rural-based processing payments. Right now, processing payments are paid to certified programs for curbside, recycling centers, collection programs, and the processing payments are subsidies to help them based on the cost of recycling that item versus the scrap value. So the example would be if it costs $500 a ton to recycle plastic number 1, but the scrap value is $100 a ton, the subsidy, the processing payment that everybody receives is $400 a ton. And the way that the cost study formula works is the state uses a weighted average from participants. But unfortunately, the high volume sites in the underserved areas, they actually pull the costs down and they affect the smaller sites. So you might have a recycling center that is doing 100 million containers and they're showing a very low operating cost. And the recycling center that's doing 50,000 containers or 100,000 containers and has a much higher cost gets hurt by the high volume site. The same could be said for the MRFs. You might have a MRF that has installed all the modern equipment. They're doing 20 to 30,000 tons a month, and they have operating costs that might be $100 a ton. But then you have some older, smaller facilities that might be doing 2,000 or 3,000 tons a month, and their operating costs are $150 to $200 a ton. That big regional facility with those lower operating costs, because they're handling more material on a weighted average, they're pulling the processing cost down for everybody. So the bigger facilities ultimately hurt the smaller facilities. And it's typically the smaller facilities that have been going out of business these days, especially on the recycling side. And right now, the current statute doesn't allow CalRecycle to make changes to help existing recycling centers or to attract new recycling centers in underserved areas through higher processing payments. So what I'm suggesting as a solution is to change the cost formula to use an average cost instead of a weighted average cost. And that would be for recycling centers, collection programs, and for curbside programs as well. So moving away from the weighted average to a straight average, but then also eliminating cost samples from high volume sites in underserved areas for recycling centers, or eliminating sites that are sampled that have inadequate or incomplete accounting records. Because there are some recycling centers that have shown that their operating cost for material is $10 to $15 a ton, because they don't keep records on rent, fuel, labor, taxes, insurance. They don't have these records, but when CalRecycle does their cost study, they do include whatever they can state, even though the auditor can recognize that they're just pulling numbers from the hat. So the solution I have is changing the cost formula to an average cost and eliminating from the cost sample the high volume sites or sites with inadequate or incomplete accounting records, and then allowing the CalRecycle Deputy Director, Division Recycling, to offer and pay higher processing payments to recycling centers located in the underserved areas. So then CalRecycle gets into the recycling business by identifying areas or regions that they could offer a higher processing payment to hopefully attract recycling centers to open up. So with that, I'll open it up to questions or comments. Commissioner Kalpakoff, is your hand up on this item? Or was that on the other item?
It was on the other item, but if you called on me, I can go.
Yeah.
All right. So using a weighted average, and you would throw out the high density. I'm just talking MRFs really quick. That's what caught my attention. You would throw out the low cost MRFs as part of the formula, and use the medium to smaller ones, however that works. And then would the larger MRFs benefit from having a higher rate coming back home?
No, I'm not suggesting that. The MRFs, anybody with good accounting systems, their costs are included, but on an average cost, not a weighted average cost. So the facility that's doing 2,000 tons, their average cost, or their cost would be the same, would be averaged with the 20,000 ton a month facility. So you might have, I'll say a 20,000 ton a month facility that has a cost of $100 a ton, and a 2,000 ton a month facility with 150 tons. The 20,000 ton facility would have a much heavier influence on the average cost.
Mm-hmm.
So it ultimately harms the lower volume facility. But if you just did it on an average rather than a weighted average, it would ultimately help both facilities. So the smaller facility with the higher cost wouldn't be harmed by the higher volume facility. And the higher volume facility would actually get rewarded for their investment and efficient equipment. Because that's one of the flaws of the program, is if somebody introduces technology or equipment to make them efficient and lower their costs, they ultimately get penalized by it.
Okay.
Any other thoughts? All right, let's move on to the next one, and then we'll come back to all three of them that I think I have. We go to the next one, Kate. And then with that, go back up one. This would be kind of the draft language in there, and it's the section within the bottle bill that addresses how the costs for certified recycling centers or other facilities are determined. Right now it says weighted. I would insert average costs and regional average costs. So they could look at it on a statewide average cost basis, but then also on a regional cost. And that was part of the AB 54 report, looking at regional costs for recycling centers. So you might have a much higher cost for the recycling centers in the far north part of the state, and they're not harmed by the more efficient facilities in the south, or I would say in the Bay Area. And then adding to the end of that section, the department exclude from the sample recycling centers receiving higher volumes of material due to lack of available recycling centers in the region, or exclude recycling centers with inadequate accounting or record keeping. In the Bay Area, the recycling centers that we have here are all high volume recycling centers, and I'm confident they're showing the lowest cost per container in the state because they're running the most containers through there. So they're bringing down the processing cost numbers for everybody else as well, because they're the only people in San Francisco, or the only 2 or 3 in San Jose. So because there's no other recycling centers and they're running so many containers through there, they show the lowest cost, and it pulls the processing cost down for everybody. And then adding a section to attract new and maintain existing redemption locations in underserved areas. The director of the department may increase the processing payments in underserved areas by up to, I put XX%, wanting to get input from the committee to a total additional processing payment to an existing recycling center shall not exceed a certain number per month. And that's where I wanted to get some input. What would be a reasonable number? I don't think going up 50% would be reasonable, and I don't think an unlimited amount of additional processing payments. For the handling fees, we put $10,000 a month. That was $120,000 a month. If an existing site were to get higher processing fees because they're in that unserved area, and I would just toss out, they received an additional $10,000 a month in processing payments. $120,000 still seems like a very nice extra for being an existing site, but it also might help attract new recycling centers in those areas to open up, pay for rent, pay for labor. So any thoughts on a reasonable percent that the director could offer up and a cap on that extra monthly amount? Any thoughts on that? My initial thoughts were 25% would be a cap, up to $10,000 per month. Within the recycling industry, there was some discussion of if you had underserved areas, as an example, Susanville or Quincy, up in the mountains, very difficult to get to. If nobody wanted to site a recycling center, there was some discussion that CalRecycle should take it out to bid and find out what a recycler needed to do that, I think that would be a pretty tough process. I think this might be a process that CalRecycle could use and see who, has interest in those areas. So any thoughts on this one? Kate, you have one public comment?
One public comment from Susan Collins with Container Recycling Institute. The MRFs aren't included in the cost studies at all. The cost studies that are used to determine processing fees, processing payments, and handling fees are surveys of redemption centers only. That's been published.
Okay. So then this would only apply to recycling centers, so it would help with the recycling center payments.
Yeah, that's
Jeff. Jeff, this is just a question. I mean, if you're looking at the average cost and regional average of cost, I guess, and that number equates to X for a certain region, right? As that number increases, should you limit it to a certain percentage, or should it be that that number gets increased until the pricing or the amount that's offered actually is an incentive for folks to build a facility, right? To your point in Susanville, I think you're mentioning, if there was a payment that was X that truly allowed for the appropriate management of that facility and appropriate returns for those that are investing, they would invest, correct? I mean, the issue has been that many of these facilities are underwater. So could there be a way to word it where instead of a hard percentage, you're looking at regional costs and what needs to be paid to actually incentivize folks to invest again in centers?
Yeah, because that's what I was trying to think about, because the thought of taking out to bid all these different areas becomes very cumbersome. Trying to determine a number for all the different areas, because whether it's Eureka, Crescent City, Susanville, up in the mountains above Reading, Paradise, those areas are all unique in their costs. And I was thinking this could be a simpler method that's within the existing structure that CalRecycle could use to offer up a higher number. So your suggestion would be to work individually with recyclers to open up and set a number just for that site?
No, for me, it's if you're going to take a look at regional costs and average costs, then, and since you use the MSAs, right, the metropolitan statistical areas, if you really looked at an MSA and said, in this MSA, the cost offering the service is X, and you provide that, then you could then incentivize people to invest. That's more what I'm saying. And the state is broken out in different MSAs.
Okay, so how would we incorporate that? Just doing regional cost?
I guess my concern has been if you put a certain amount that says X percent, if that X percent does not meet the reality of what's needed for investment, then it really doesn't matter, right?
And it would still remain an underserved area.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And at that point, the fallback, unfortunately, would be with the grocers at that point. If there was an underserved area, the grocers would be the fallback. And with one of the prior policies, eliminating the store exemptions to 35% by jurisdiction, it should open up some areas where the stores would be the fallback. So if there was a maximum and nobody was there, the stores would still be the fallback for the consumers to take their containers back. And that's where the stores would have to engage maybe with the recycling center to contribute even more than the maximum amount that the director could offer to bridge that gap to open up a recycling center up there. Okay. So with this and the bottle bill, when it gets into the cost studies and how processing payments, this gets into the weeds, it gets into the details and the complexities of the program. So this is probably not one that I think we can move forward at this point, because there's a lot more. And this is where I wish Cal Recycle could get with us and have an open dialogue on, the solutions that they would see. I was kind of taking this off of what the AB 54 report was suggesting. So possibly in the future, there'll be time where we could discuss it with Cal Recycle on what their thoughts were on the AB 54 report. So, okay, Kate, if you can go to the next slide. This is a new one. Hopefully it's a little bit simple. Right now you have the penalty account. So if there's fines that are assessed, money goes into the penalty account, and that is only accessible through legislation. And then you have stores that are paying $3,000 a month into the option B payments. And that just goes into the fund account. And Cal Recycle doesn't have any money available where they could help recycling centers start up or modernize in underserved areas or rural areas. So I think a possible solution would be converting the penalty account funds and the option B payments to be used as matching grants for redemption programs in rural or underserved areas, and authorizing the Cal Recycle Deputy Director to use the funds to assist redemption programs in rural or underserved areas. So everybody would see what the amount is in this account, and then it could be used as matching funds. And the example that I give are the 60 stores in San Francisco that are paying $3,000 a month, approximately $2.1 million a year, and that's just going into the fund. It's not doing anything to help open up redemption centers in San Francisco. And then Cal Recycle just doesn't have access to any money. I'm thinking that if we converted the penalty account and used the option B payment money, put that into an account, Cal Recycle could use that as matching grants to help recycling centers in underserved or rural areas. So any thoughts on this one? Commissioner Ferrante.
Yeah, what is that money currently used for, or what has it been used for?
So the last time that it was used was in the fiscal year 1920 budget. They pulled the money out, and it was $5 million for low volume recycling centers. So low volume recycling centers were paid $1,000 per month with that $5 million. Commissioner Lapis, is that your recollection as well?
I was trying to remember. I don't actually remember.
Yeah.
I will say that generally speaking, penalties are treated differently under the law because they're technically general fund. Penalties are not subject to the same restrictions that special fund revenues are. And so I think that traditionally the legislature has not been okay with continually appropriating penalty money, but I'm not exactly sure how that applies here.
Yeah, and that's what I'm suggesting, is because it is penalty money. They have designated that it can only be used through legislation, which is very difficult. I don't think this is a sizable amount. I think at one point it got up to almost $8 million, and that's when they appropriated the $5 million for the low volume recycling centers. So this would be a change and turn the penalty account money and the money paid by the grocers is the option B payment, put that into an account that Cal Recycle could then use to help recycling centers in underserved or rural areas create redemption opportunities.
Can I add a minor comment? I'm not sure we should necessarily be lumping rural in with underserved. There are some very large, high volume facilities in rural areas. And I think that it's just, I'm not sure it's right to say that rural is the target.
Okay. What would you think?
Yeah, I would think just underserved.
Underserved.
That's a broader term. But...
Okay. I can go with that. Is this something that the group is comfortable moving forward, or is it something that we should delay until January? Because we're going to have to move on to the next item. And then Kate, I see you have one public comment.
That was from before. Well, yes, I do. This was from Cheryl Auger from BAN SUP, which stands for Single-Use Plastics. Knowing that we are in a plastic crisis, we are writing to express our support and recommendations for the Recycling Committee. Number 1, support Commission's recommendations. Number 2, support local additions for recycled items to meet state criteria and 75% as a pathway to be recycled. No probation nor grace period should be applied since that would not help achieve the goals of the recycling system. Number 3, require extended producer responsibility for CRV bottles. Number 4, adopt stricter standards for what is compostable. And that has been published. No other comments.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lapis.
Yeah, sorry, I should have mentioned this earlier. Is there any way we can keep to support reduction opportunities in underserved areas, but eliminate the language about matching grants? Because I think in general, matching grants or grants aren't the most cost-effective way to offer incentives. They are a tool, but I wouldn't want to be limited to just that.
So it would just be grant money.
I would just say to support redemption opportunities in underserved areas and not be explicit about how they do that. So that gives them more options.
Okay. I think that could work. Commissioner Kopikoff?
This is just a process question for you, Chair Don Levy. So we're looking at these little individual fixes in this bottle bill. I think there's one more coming up. Are you going to put this into a package and we're going to be able to look at it as a package and what effectiveness all of these together are going to do, or are we just going to piecemeal this thing together? What's the best process for this committee and for you? Let me ask you that.
Yeah, I think we went through some last week at the commission or this week at the commission. These would be additions to that. So that would be one package. With this committee, unfortunately with time and details, we can't go through the entire 130 pages of the bottle bill and address all the issues. But I think it starts sending the message on the major reform that needs to be done with some indication of some items that this commission would like to see done. I think there is general consensus that something will happen this session with the new director. Either we are going to see major reform or there's going to be a stewardship organization. I don't think anybody in the legislature or Senate is not going to do anything with the bottle bill. And I don't think there's going to be any short-term let's try and kick the can down the road for 3 years. I don't think that's going to be acceptable to anybody this year. So if we have one or two more items to add to what we went over at the commission on Tuesday, that would be part of the report. But with what I had on Wednesday, just the strong message that major reform needs to happen.
Okay. Yeah. I agree with you, and I think these individual changes are good. I think Nick made a good point on the underserved part, taking the rule out, because are you going to cap the money, or is it just going to be the Nick, what were your thoughts on that? You don't want matching grants. I like the matching grants. You're just going to give Cal Recycle the authority to use money at their discretion?
Yeah, I mean, truth is, I don't like grants. It's not the matching part that I don't like. We've just seen things like the effectiveness of something like the Plastic Market Development Program, which is a guaranteed incentive payment, is much more effective than some of the grant programs we've had, where it creates winners and losers, first of all, but also it's harder to budget for people. You can't really budget on whether or not you're going to get a competitive grant, but you can budget on a guaranteed incentive payment. So in general, I think we prefer non-grant options.
So maybe using the language in the last proposal fix of adding additional, maybe a 25% processing payment or handling fees for those underserved areas. Is that maybe what we're looking at, using that extra the option B money in the penalty account?
I mean, that would help pay for it. I don't think we're talking about a ton of sites being eligible for it. Some in Southern California. I always talk about Santa Monica. It has cost issues that are different than 10 miles west or 10 miles east of Santa Monica. Quite a few in Northern California and the far north of California. So the matching grants, my thoughts, when Cal Recycle offers up grants, it's kind of free money, and whether they're successful or not, the money is going to be gone. I think when it's a matching grant, the operators have their money on the table as well. So I think the chances of success are better when it's a matching than just gifting money out. But on the other side, if it was just offering out the money, it could set up RVMs at some stores where they might want to use those to help their customers.
Yeah, and I think there's two ways to look at it. There's an ongoing operational cost of these, and that would probably come through the increased processing fees, right? And then there's a one-time money that you're maybe alluding to, which is technology, maybe some equipment that they need for that site, which would be a one-time grant money, or do we want to continue to fund these things? The other question, and Jeff, my original kind of question was to take a snapshot of 7 fixes, and because on Wednesday we fixed looks like some of the stores, limiting the amount of stores that could be exempt, right? And then which would add probably money to this fund. That was probably what I'm trying to say. I didn't say it very well, but once a handful of these fixes go in, what's the bucket on this one, right? When there's more option B money coming into it, is this a larger, is this a $3 million problem a year that we're going to be pushing through to the underserved areas? Is it a 1 million? I don't know if you can answer that, or Cal Recycle could. Maybe that's another one of these data requests. But are you talking $100,000 a year into this fund, which doesn't maybe move the needle on too many underserved, or is it 5 million? Or do we know?
San Francisco is paying 2.1 million a year into it.
A year, yeah.
A year, and it's doing nothing to help get a site in San Francisco.
Sure.
And I think there's more stores that are paying into that fund. Just looking for some opportunity to get CalRecycle some money that they could offer up for interested recycling centers to open up in these underserved areas, or support them in areas that have shut down, such as Eureka. So
maybe my question would be more specific. Is it looking for a one-time grant fund, or is it more of an operating cost to keep them running?
I think it'd be a one-time startup, and then the processing fees are the ongoing enticement for operations to stay in the.
That was the fix on the last one, and then this one would be getting a little starter money to get going.
Yeah. So if it's a baler, if it's a densifier, something to get them going, because there's areas you just can't have a truck and some bags. You're definitely going to have to densify the material somehow. And this could help somebody start up. Could pay rent for 2 years in a building. So.
Okay.
So we got about 20 minutes left. Any thoughts whether we should table this one for the report or try and refine it and move it up to the commission for the 16th for a little more discussion? Okay, seeing none, I think I'll just table this one at this point. But definitely thank you for the thoughts and input. And the bottle bill, definitely one of the most challenging things I think anybody deals with. I was talking to one staff person, and they said, I don't want to address the bottle bill. It's just too much. So obviously we're kind of at that point. Okay, with that, I want to move on to the data request from CalRecycle. They did a huge amount of work. Is somebody from CalRecycle on that's available for any questions?
Chair Donlevy, we have Desiree Porzio. Sorry, Desiree, I've ruined your last name, on, who's available to answer clarifying questions. Yeah.
All right, Desiree, did you do this work?
I worked with another coworker.
Oh my gosh, amazing. Well, I kind of summarized it and we sent it out to everybody, but I just did.
Just to note for the public, this is on the CalRecycle public notice published. Yeah.
Is this like the one that I had sent you?
Oh no.
On the slides?
Oh, I'm sorry. I just switched. Yes, let me go back to that. Apologies.
Yeah.
I got excited. Okay. There you go.
And what I did is I took the data real quick and I just did 2 side-by-sides looking at the 75% recycling rate and a 90% recycling rate, comparing current, or if we added wine and spirits, if we increased the deposit to $0.10, if we increased wine and spirits and went up to $0.10, what the effects would be. So I just put them side by side. I did add one row that identifies the sales tax to the general fund. So currently, the CRV that consumers put down, the 1.4 billion, is generating about 107 million in general fund sales tax revenue. So if we added wine and spirits, it would add a little bit more. If we went to $0.10, it looks like it would add another 78 million, or excuse me, 88 million in sales tax if we did wine and spirits, plus $0.10, about 200 million. But with this, so at a 75% rate, under the current scenario, CalRecycle is projecting that the fund would be in a deficit situation.
In our current situation, according to fiscal year 2019-20 numbers, that's correct.
Okay. And if we switch over to the next slide, the 90%. So at 90%, we would be in a deep deficit under all 3 scenarios. Yeah, I mean, the system is not set up to run at a 90%. So Desiree, if we were to be in a deficit situation, how do we overcome that gap? Does the general fund back up the program? What happens?
We would go into a proportional reduction scenario and we'd start cutting payments as outlined in the statute.
Okay. And which payments would get cut?
Graham, can you go into that information in a little more detail?
Yeah, sure. Refund value would not be affected, but what would be affected would be handling fees, plastic market development, quality incentive payments, all of the payments specified under section 14581. And I think there's something to be aware about is that they're probably at a 90% level or close to that are probably not enough cuts that are payments that are available to be cut that would make up for that deficit. So that's something that we are aware about. So as Mr. Dunleavy said, at 90%, the system really cannot handle that. Yes, we will be into proportional reduction, but that will not be enough.
Okay, and then the bottom lines, processing fees paid by beverage manufacturers. Currently, they're paying in about 27 million, and then if we add wine and spirits, it would go up 4 million. If we went up to a dime, they wouldn't pay any more, correct?
Changing the CRV to a dime only affects the amount of CRV that comes into the program and the amount of CRV that goes out of the program. It wouldn't affect the processing fees or processing fee offsets at all.
Okay. So if we run into a structural deficit, whether it's at 75% or 90%, proportional reductions would not be enough. There would have to be an increase by the beverage manufacturers.
I don't know.
To clarify that, the processing fee offset would automatically go up, as well as, the processing fee would go up, the processing fee offset would go down, and all of the other 14581 payments would also be reduced or go down. But at 90%, what I previously said was that there's not enough outlay there to make up for a deficit that is that great. So, if that answers your question.
So if the program were to be very successful at a 90% rate, it would go bankrupt.
Short answer, yes.
Uh-oh. Okay. All right.
And this is Teresa with CalRecycle. Just one clarifying point that Graham made is that the only way that the processing fee that manufacturers pay is adjusted is if we go into proportional reduction. In current law, there is no way for the department to adjust that. And so that's why you see the processing fee offset is so high. That is coming from the bottle bill fund.
Okay. All right. If you could flip back to the 75% one, a little more reasonable. For the committee members, any questions on the information since we have CalRecycle?
Jeff, can you hear me? Did we lose Jeff?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. The current, what are we at currently? Like 67% or something like that?
68, yes.
These numbers here are provided the 70% recycling rate, which is what we were at for fiscal year 2019-20.
Yeah. Kate, if you could move up a slide.
I'm sorry, to
That one. Yep.
Okay.
And this is a snapshot of the projections that CalRecycle had in their recent quarterly report. And they're indicating that for fiscal year 2020, 2021, recycling rate is going to go up to 86%. Pretty successful for aluminum and PET. For CalRecycle staff, where do you think the additional recycling is going to come from?
I can only comment on this data request.
Okay.
I can't comment on other data. Sorry.
Okay. Commissioner Kalpikoff.
Yeah, so we're gonna jump up 12% this year on the CRV rate. Is that what this slide shows?
They're projecting that the recycling rate is going to go from where it's at right now, about 68, 69%, up to 86%. So they think it's going to be a very successful recycling year. That's going to put us somewhere between that 75% and 90%, which means that they're going to run into a structural deficit real quick. That's going to put the fund out of money.
I wonder if that's a stay-at-home COVID solution / problem to the recycling rate. Is that what we're seeing?
Without CalRecycle being able to comment, my guess would be they're projecting back to the last time we went into a recession and sales went down and redemption went up, because as you run into a recession, discretionary spending goes down and people look for every nickel they can find. So they take more cans and bottles back to the recycling centers. So my guess would be they're projecting sales are down and people are going to find more recycling centers, even if they have to drive a little bit farther. So
or use their cart, right? At the curb?
Yes.
So either solution, Jeff, if I read these slides correctly, and I'm not a CPA by any means, but
Commissioner Dunleavy
is going to be underwater, right?
Yes. So all the more reason that we need a major fix. So yes, Kate.
Sorry, this is Teresa, Commissioner Dunleavy. I was wondering, is this the QR3 or which data point did you pull this from?
The last quarterly report that came out 3 weeks ago.
Okay, I think we have Graham on the line. If Graham, if you want to talk about our methodology for 2021, I think it was just.
I would like to, if I can, make a general comment about the distinction of the recycling rates in the quarterly report versus the recycling rates used in the committee's data request. What you're seeing now is a quotient of dollars over dollars, meaning refund value over redemption fees, CRV in over CRV out. That produces a very different number than when you look at containers returned over containers sold, which is the basis of the analysis we did for the committee request. The dollar over dollar rates are somewhat inflated because these monies include administrative fees. So the refund value amount has the 2.5% administrative fee added to it in the numerator, and the CRV in amount has the 1.5% reduction taken by distributors subtracted from the denominator. So you're looking at a much higher percentage rate when you look at the dollar over dollar quotient with the administrative fees than you do with the container numbers. So if we converted this into containers, it would not be 86%. It would be, if you add up 2.5% and 1.5%, there's a 4% factor that inflates this number. So that I just wanted to make a general comment about this distinction. So perhaps for this discussion, if we address the containers returned over containers sold rate, I think that we would probably gain some clarity when we're trying to make comparisons.
Okay. Kate, if you could go back, I think it's 2 slides to the 75% rate. I think that's probably more realistic of where we're at. For the committee members, any other questions or thoughts on this? I know it's just a ton of information. Thinking I'd wear a Mark Cuban hat with 3 commas on it, when you're getting into the billions.
My comment would be, as in an underserved area, that 10 cents is not, it's just not in the realm of what people can handle when there's nowhere to take back your container and get your dime back. And curbside is nice to be able to recycle the material and not have it end up in landfill. But putting a container in a curbside bin doesn't get me my nickel back, and certainly doesn't get me my dime back. And so this idea of speaking on behalf of all underserved areas, the idea of going to 10 cents for 1 can and then a 12-pack is $1.20 is like 50% of the cost of a product of what a 12-pack is, and it blows my mind.
Yeah, I mean, good point. I think with all this information, I don't think that this committee is at a point where we could make a recommendation to add wine and spirits or going up to a dime until it's resolved how we're going to get redemption opportunities in the underserved areas. It's a ton of information, but the core problem is we have areas that don't have the redemption centers. They're able to use the curbside programs that's convenient, and it is a good recycling option. But before looking at adding, more to the program or increasing the deposit to hopefully kick up the recycling rate, we got to solve the problem of getting recycling centers operating, and that comes to how much they get paid or incentivize them to open up in these underserved areas. So, Kate, I see you got 2 public comments, and we got about 5 minutes left before we get cut off.
Yes, 5-minute warning, 2 public comments. One is from Scott DeFife from the Glass Packaging Institute. On behalf of the glass industry, we're hopeful that there will be an opportunity to comment and engage in a detailed manner on the changes and recommendations that the committee is discussing to the bottle bill program in the state. Will there be more opportunities for testimony? Second comment, Susan Collins, questions for CalRecycle staff. What were the original sources of information for the number of wine and spirit containers? And what were the original sources of information for the sizes of wine and spirit containers? Sizes determine 5 and 10 cent deposits. Those have been published. And I also wanted to apologize for not introducing Graham, who has also dealt with a barrage of my emails. So.
And then just to answer Susan Collins, I think the information that was provided, they have some back sheets that have the data sources and the descriptions, what they use to come up with the wine and spirit numbers. But Graham, can you shed any light on the data sources other than what was published? Or is he gone?
Is that specifically for the wine and spirits figures, or is that a more general question?
It was
for wine.
Go ahead.
Yeah, can you just go over the sources that were on the sheet that provided and the links?
I would say that the
sheet provided.
So yeah, there was the links actually give the data sources. The data sources were actually general sources. I wanted to use. I wanted to
actually.
Use,
you have that model. It has.
Okay, somebody's breaking up there, but. Okay, we are about ready to get cut off. Any final comments from the committee members? Okay, I don't think we're going to be able to get to dates for a future meeting. I think what I'll do is I'll send out one of the doodle polls and we can try and regroup sometime in 2021. We'll definitely see each other again at the next commission meeting. And then Kate, any last public comments that we need to address or hear at this point?
No public comments.
Okay, I think we have 3 policy items that we can work on and get up to the commission level. Compliments of Commissioner Dell and Commissioner Lapis. 2, we just have 2. Okay, we got 2 that will move up. And then on the recycling, the processing payments and the penalty account, I think that will have to be addressed in 2021. So just want to thank everybody for another very fast meeting. I know when it gets into the bottle bill, it gets into the weeds, but I think we were successful today with the 2 policies that we're going to be moving up to the commission in 2 weeks. So with that, thank everybody for your attendance today. Have a good weekend. Grab your favorite CRV beverage and find a container of your choice. Enjoy. See you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.